Hello, good evening in Pakistan, and I hope so. A very good morning over there, Jeff. I'm Rizwan Akram here in Rizwan Akram classroom, and as usual in classroom, there are two type of people. Either they are student and either they are teacher. So I'm every day as a student, and all the guests who appear in my show as a guest are always my teachers. So today I have very special teacher that is Dr. Jack Burns. So Burns, welcome to the classroom once again.
It's a
And
pleasure.
would you like to share about yourself first?
Yes. Well, my name is Jeff Burns. I have a doctorate degree in peace studies. And so I have been a full time peacemaker. I tell people I'm a full time peacemaker in the way of Jesus or the way of Isa al Masih. And I've been doing this for over 15 years. And I used to hate Muslims, believe it or not, 15 years ago. And God used a little Muslim boy in my life that completely changed my life and the way I saw Muslims. And you can see that story on my YouTube channel. And so I have spent all this time helping churches and mosques become friends, helping them find common ground. And one of the biggest common grounds I tell people we have is in our Jewish friends call it the Shema. Um, in the Quran, the Bible, it's called loving your neighbor as yourself. So, and that was the core message of what Jesus preached. So I go to mosques and churches and I say, you guys have a lot more in common than you realize. Our books say we're to love God with all of our heart, mind, soul, and strength, love our neighbors ourselves, treat other people the way we want to be treated. And if we find enemies along the way, do everything we can to make them our friends. So that's what I do. I tell people we have common ground, treat people the way you want to be treated. And then one of the things we do is people say, well, how do you live out such a message? Well, I encourage Muslims and Christians to do four things: become good friends, eat together. And I tell them we're not friends until we're eating in each other's homes and our children are playing together. Explore faith together, understand each other's faith as friends, and then do something good together in your community. Do it together as Muslims and Christians, not just Muslims doing good and Christians doing good. Do it together. And what that does is that shows the world, it really gives glory to God to say, wow, Muslims and Christians, and in some places, Jewish people have been involved. And the world looks at that and says, well, maybe there's a God if they're willing to come together and do this, in our communities. So I do that. And the other thing I do is I'm a life coach I have my own practice called Carolina Coastal Coaching. And I'm also a leadership coach trained by Dr. John Maxwell, and a success coach trained by Dr. Jack Canfield. So I love helping people, whether it's coaching, and I've coached a lot of professional women, and I also like working for peace. And so in our city where we live now, I've helped our church to build a bridge to the mosque that's just a mile away from us. And so once people get to know each other, everything changes. You just become humans, human beings, So yeah, that's kind of a short summary of what I do here.
So nice of you, Jeff. You have given a beautiful introduction of yourself, and especially the peace-loving human beings are very rare, as you know. Uh, I want to ask you about the things that what is meant by Islamophobia
Yeah,
and how this concept arise in Western country. Islam,
yeah,
every religion is a religion of
yeah,
peace, and Islam means the
yeah.
peace. So how this terminology and the
Mhm.
people are going to be aligned together, like
Yeah,
terrorism are aligned to Islam or Islamophobia. So how
right.
this arose it?
Well, that's a good question. And I'm not quite sure how far back it goes, but I know that right after 9/11, not 9/11
Okay.
changed. It was like Muslims were living in America, uh, but after 9/11, Americans really realized there's Muslims among us. A lot of Americans assumed that all Muslims thought that way. Do you know what I'm saying? They assumed that all Muslims were terrorists. And unfortunately, I was one of those. Or if they didn't think they were terrorists, they assumed, or I assumed at that time, that Muslims were at least sympathetic towards terrorism. So that's where we get the term Islamophobia. Islamophobia is like, okay, you're a Muslim. I've already got you figured out. I know what you are. You've got this secret agenda to take over the world. You really hate Christians. You hate Jews. You would put us all under Sharia. That's what tomorrow, if you could. And most American Westerners don't even know what Sharia is. They don't even understand.
All based on assumptions,
Yeah, all based on assumptions. And they don't. And once you explain what Sharia really is, it's a lot of that stuff. Fear goes away. So it's a lot of it's ignorance. And so that's kind of that's in a nutshell. So Islamophobia is a fear of Muslims. And it comes from ignorance. Most people that who are Islamophobic don't have a Muslim friend. They don't have a Muslim connection. They don't have, and so what they do is someone comes along and says, well, there's a violent verse in the Quran. See, they're violent. I said, well, wait a minute now. You've got to understand context. You got to understand why that's there, and it's not about Christians. You know what I'm saying? It's not about, so they would think that when they hear the word infidel, that the Quran saying all
Jeff,
Christians.
I'm listening to you. Please continue.
Oh, I'm sorry. And so they assume that when they hear the word infidel in the Quran, that it means everybody that's not a Muslim, and it's not what it meant. When we look at that, we know that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be to him, was fighting. There was conflict with Mecca and the pagans. You know what I'm saying? There was a whole different narrative, but that was for that time. That doesn't mean that. But the same thing is with the Old Testament. There are verses in the Old Testament that talk about wars and talk about fighting. Those were the times they lived in. And so I try to help people understand you got to look at everything in context, and you've got to look at everything that way. And don't talk about the Quran if you haven't read it. Don't go around assuming what you know. So in America, when people say, well, we should burn the Quran, and don't get me wrong, I don't hear a lot of Americans talking that way. So a lot of stuff I think maybe that they hear in Pakistan about Americans, a lot of it's true, a lot of it's not true. Even on our beaches, there are Muslims on our beaches. There are people, and most Muslims that I talk to, a lot of them are afraid right now of the Islamophobia, but a lot of them would say, I'd rather live here than anywhere else. Still, it's still good. But one of the things I do when people say, well, the Quran is a book from the devil. I say, really? Yes, it's from the devil. I say, have you read it? And they'll say, no, I don't need to. I say, well, and the Muslims will say, but the Bible is bad. And I'll say, have you read it? Have you actually read it? You read. And so I'll tell them, well, it's interesting, in the Quran, if you burn the Quran, you're burning a bunch of verses about Isa. Isa al-Masih, Jesus. I said, I'll tell them, did you know that the Quran calls Isa or Jesus the Messiah? 11 times? You want to burn that? I said, Muslims call him the Messiah. And they said, we didn't know that. I said, the Quran calls Isa or Jesus the statement of truth, the one who raised the dead, he's virgin born. It has a whole chapter on his mother, Miriam. I said, do you want to burn that? And then I'll say, he's called the Word of God, Spirit of God. I said, there's a lot. I said, so all that lines up with, it's not, it doesn't contradict what's in our book. So why would you want to burn a book that speaks so highly, not just of Jesus, don't get me wrong, or Isa, but of Moses? Musa is the most, if I understand correctly, the most talked about prophet in the Quran. Do you know what I'm saying? I said, why would we want to?
Exactly. It's about 28 times.
Yeah. And I said, why would we want to? And so I start walking them through that kind of deconstruction, I call it. And I just say, you got to understand something. When you start burning things or destroying things or hurting people that you don't understand, in that moment, you become an instrument of Shaitan. It's fear. You become a vessel. So I just try to bring that fear down. And what I tell people, so let's look at them. Let's actually look, what's there. And there are things that are for context. Like when you read the Old Testament, there's things in the Old Testament we don't do anymore. You know what I mean? That we are in different times. We don't do those things anymore. And so, so that's what I try to do. And I have found personally, the Muslim community has been very favorable. I've had very little conflict, honestly. one or two times in 15 years. Even that, the Muslims got on to the two Muslims that got mad at me, and so, so anyway, that's what I do. And I try to help people see the beauty in their faith, because in the end, we believe there's one God. We believe there's one God, and we're to love him with all of our heart, mind, soul, and
Exactly.
strength. And Muslims and Christians both deeply love Jesus. I have never met a Muslim that did not love Jesus. And so I tell people, Jesus is a wonderful bridge for us to have a conversation. It is. He's a wonderful bridge. And I mean, and so Muslims will say, how can I hate Jesus? And I love it. I have an imam friend of mine. He's a scholar. And he said, Jeff, when you go to teach in churches, we Muslims will be praying for you. And I said, thank you. He says, and you tell those Christians that Isa is not just their baby. He's our baby too. And he's from the Middle East. And he said, and I just, okay, I will tell them. And so but Islamophobia it's just like racism, it's a form of, it really is a form of discrimination. And I know there's Muslims that don't. There's Muslims. Some people, we've seen that with Bin Laden and other groups that take one or two verses from the Quran and they use it as a weapon to try to, to create an ideology. Well, it happens in the Christian world too. There are Christians that create ideologies around a couple of verses or an idea that you have to say, well, wait a minute now, that's just crazy. You got to read the whole story, And when anybody tries to tell you not to read or you should not listen, that's a red flag. You know what I mean? That's always a danger sign. I'm like, okay, the truth, if something's true, it can't harm us. It's what we don't know that can harm us, So I become I see myself as an advocate in America for the American Muslim, not just American, but other Muslims, but I live here, And so when people start saying this stuff, I'll say, well, I used to think like you did, but I changed, and here's why, And so, yeah. But so Islamophobia is a very real thing, and it's a thing where, and it's kind of, how do you put this? A lot of times Muslims can be easy targets. And what I mean is, if a woman wears the hijab, she stands out. And or if a man is not dressing in a Western way, people can assume. But I really have a deep respect for our Muslim sisters who and they're doing it out of conviction. Do you know what I'm saying? And some cover, some don't cover, and that's okay. But they're doing it out of conviction. They're not doing it out of force. Does that make sense? In the West, the ones who in the West are doing this because they believe in this. So I tell people, look, just because people don't look like you, or don't judge them until them. And what people don't realize, Muslims have, and if they ever figure this out, Western Christians or conservative Christians and Muslims have very close values, very similar. They just haven't figured it out yet,
Jeff, I will like to add a certain amount within your conversation that I'm living in Faisalabad, that is the city of state Punjab. Here in Faisalabad, there's a unique thing. It's unique in perspective of Pakistan that there is a church in my city, and there is a mosque, and there is a single wall between them. They are
Wow.
just aligned together. Never ever there is any sort of hassle, some sort of fight. Never happened for the last
Yeah.
100 years, I think so. They're living
Yeah.
aligned. So
Wow.
this is all about the peace. Now, you said that a lot of things are common between them. So,
Yes.
Jeff, I would like to ask that when you label people by their dress, isn't not the disrespect of humanity that you are labeling a person only because of his outlook? It's
Yes.
not
Yeah.
being human.
Right. It's wrong. And the same thing happened to a lot of Jewish people. You know what I mean? A lot of the way the Jewish people would dress, they
Yeah,
they stood out. And so when people want to scapegoat, the way they can look at the way someone's dressing and, oh, they're different from us. oh, we found out one of them was a terrorist over here or whatever, like bin Laden. So that all of a sudden it reinforces, and then the ideas, start getting formed. Like, oh, women are wearing the hijab because they will be killed if they don't. Well, that might be true somewhere. I don't know. But the whole thing is, it's not true. And I have a Palestinian friend, a really good friend, and his name is Musa. And and he's been here for good night 40 years, I guess, and successful, wonderful human being, dear brother. And every now and then he'll run into someone that say, "Go back to your own country." And he goes, "This is my country." And if we all went back to our own country, we would go to a lot of places of origin. I mean, I'm an immigrant. My ancestors came from Ireland and Scotland. I mean, when you start,
can we find the true Americans over there?
Yeah. I had someone ask me that the other day. I was at the beach, and a European young man came up to me and he goes, "Where are all the Americans?" And I said, "Well, they're everywhere." And he did not like black people, and he did not like Mexicans and stuff. And he goes, "I only want to be around white people." I said, "Listen, America is not just white people. America is, I mean, there's a lot of color and religious backgrounds with America." I had to kind of walk him through that, and help him to see that. And so yeah, I think the only, what I would call the true Americans, were probably the Native Americans that were, that were here before we got here. But even they came across the Bering Strait, thousands of years before. So we're all immigrants. All of the whole story of humanity is we've been moving. I mean, you look at Turkey and you look at you just go back. I mean, it's just amazing. So we're all in the end immigrants, people movements, and to say that, this is like Pakistan. The whole history of Pakistan has been very dynamic. And it's not a lot of people can look at Pakistan in one way. The media can, but then when you start watching the videos, wow, that's a beautiful country. I mean, they've got beautiful mountains. The people are beautiful. And I tell people, I've never met an ugly Pakistani. They're all beautiful, men and women. They're just beautiful people, and they just, and the food, you see the food, you see and the history. And I tell people, wow, that's a country. If the world ever figures it out, it's going to become a major tourist place in time. I think it will. I think it could really, there's a lot of people. It's very ancient. The history there is just beautiful. And I want to come someday, hopefully. Yeah.
Jeff, I want to know about the people's concept about when the normal public American who is not biased, who is a neutral person, when he listen about Pakistan, what is the concept he realize about Pakistan? What he think about how is the country, or either he don't know about either it's a Pakistan or not.
Oh, you mean what would the average American think about Pakistan? Is that what you're asking me? That's a good question. I don't fully know the answer to that. I know that a lot. Of course, we actually are allies with Pakistan. You know what I mean? We're allies with Pakistan, and I think a lot of times maybe when people think of Pakistan, they think of, of course, bin Laden was in Pakistan. You know what I mean? They think of things. They don't know much about Pakistan in that regard. They don't know. But once people start seeing stuff like on the Travel Channel, and once they start meeting people like you and others, they realize there's a big country. This is a beautiful place, and but we have a lot of Pakistanis in America. We have a lot of Pakistani, in America. And in fact, a lot of the technology companies, they hire a lot of Pakistanis because they're educated, they're hardworking people, And so I have many Pakistani friends I've made over the years, and I love them. And they are very committed. I tell you one thing I've learned about Pakistani people, and this is true of, I think, of a lot of Muslims. They love their families. They love their families. They will take care of their moms, their dads. They will take care of each other, and they have big families, It's just, wow, I love it. And it's just, they there's a lot of love there in those families, and I have observed that, and they help each other. Once one starts experiencing the American dream, they want to make sure the rest of them, experience.
Exactly.
And so, but they are, and a very jolly people, too. I think they're very, and yeah,
Jeff, uh, thank you for the COVID that it's make closer to each other. Na? You are just living in my neighborhood, about some 1,000 miles away,
oh
but
yeah,
just neighborhood. So now, due to COVID, we are talking through this communication. So we are
I
learning
know,
about each other. Na?
I,
So
yeah,
in this way, uh, I know that common American and average American is a lovable person, is a nice human being. They don't think about Pakistan as a terrorist. They
right,
love every person who is being human. And
right,
other thing is that it means that the communication between every religion, every country can you can say that remove the assumptions that can make you closer to each other. So
right,
it means there is a communication gap,
yeah,
or the distance between us have making us somehow a terrorist or somehow a hero. So communication
right,
gap should be removed from here, no?
right, exactly. And that's what I appreciate so much about Rehan Alawala. I really appreciate Rehan, and I appreciate his vision of what he's trying to do. He's really trying to say, I'm going to start with Pakistan. I want Pakistanis to step out of their comfort zone and get to know people. You know how he has steps, and you have to interview people, and you have to do all that. And so what he's doing is
Exactly.
he's getting he's stretching people. So I have people from villages. They'll say, I'm in the so and so village. Can I interview you? I say, absolutely. I said, we made the schedule. I love doing this. I just love doing this. And so he's stretching them and he's showing them hope. Do you know what I'm saying? He's showing them hope and that they can change the world. But he's doing it in a very
Exactly.
smart way. He's doing it in a way, it's all about connection. And you really can't. And one thing I have over the years observed, there's a lot of interfaith stuff that goes on in the world, and it can be high level. And you'll have maybe spiritual leaders they could be, and I'm muftis and Christian bishops and others, and they may come together and have a good meeting and sign documents and things, and they're good. It's good. They sign resolutions of how the world should be. But sometimes they've not been good on showing us how to do that. Do you know what I'm saying? But at least what they're saying is this should be done. So what I try to do is come along, and people like Rehan say, well, since we should be doing this, here's some steps we can take, And so that's why I'm a big fan of Rehan. I think he's on to something, and I think he's going to succeed. I do, and I think there's a lot of Americans love Rehan, and there's a lot of diversity there. A lot of people in the UK love Rehan. Rehan appeals to not just Pakistanis but Westerners. You know what I mean? He's a very funny man. I don't know if you notice, he's got his whole smile and stuff is very disarming. You know what I mean? He does
He,
you
he,
cannot like him.
he, 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 he he has a bossy look for us.
Yes, yes, he does. He just has this personality that so I think he's going to succeed, and I think we're in a time in history globally right now um, that it's time for change. And in our country, you're hearing about the demonstrations and things. It's time. It's time for change to change, and it's time to push it all the way. And I don't mean that in a violent way. I mean, it's time to say, if something's wrong, we change it, and we keep moving till we change it. And if it's Muslims and Christians represent what? It's almost 60% of the world. It's time we discover each other and that we learned, friendship. And it's time that we stand up for the rights of minorities in our communities, whether they be racial minorities or religious minorities. It's time that I was in a meeting a few years back speaking to 200 men. And I brought up this whole issue of Islamophobia. And I also brought up the issue of race. And a man came up to me afterwards. He's a businessman. And he says, I really love what you said. And he goes, I have a problem. He said, at work, and he says, and I'm working with other Christians, they're friends, but they'll tell racial jokes. You know what I mean by racial jokes? Jokes that tear down a race. You know what I mean? And use, bad language about people of color.
Okay.
And he goes, I don't like it, but I don't know how to change it. And I said, well, what do you do when you hear those jokes? He goes, I don't say anything. Or I just, and I said, I can tell you how to stop it tomorrow. And he says, what? I said, are you a follower of Jesus? He said, yes. I said, go into the tomorrow to work. And when these people start telling these jokes, just say, excuse me, folks, I love you guys so much. You're my friends, but I'm a Christian, and I know you claim to be Christian. And God has touched my heart that we should not talk this way about people of color. And you know what? I said, if you do that, they'll never do it again. Because they're thinking it too, but no one's had the courage to speak up. So, you know what I mean? They're afraid of being the odd person. And so I tell people the way you stop these things is being the one that says we should stop. You know what I mean? And so when people say, well, Muslims are terrorists, I say, no, that's just not true. I say, you need to meet my Muslim friends. You need to do, and what happens, it's like it breaks a spell in their mind. So they look at me, here's a white guy, saying this, and that's another white guy. You know what I mean? They're like, wow. And then they say, well, you used to hate Muslims. What changed you? And I tell them my story of how God used little Omar, a Muslim boy, in my life. And then some of them will say, well, if you can change, maybe I can change. So how's that phrase go? Be the change in the world that you want to be. You be the change. Don't wait for somebody else to lead the way. Don't wait for somebody else to say, I'm going to be good where I am in my village or in my school. I'm going to be the one. And people, it may not make a big difference, but it'll make a difference in here. See, in me, I will have honor in my heart, and I'll have honor with Allah. You know what I mean? And it's so interesting. When you read the Quran, I say this to how can you hate a book? Because I love the Quran and I love the Bible. I love both books. And I said, how can you hate a book that every chapter every surah except one starts out with the Bismillah? You know what I mean? In the name of God, most merciful. I said, and that tells us God is reminding us in each chapter, I am the one who is merciful. I am the one who's compassionate. So when you go into these ayahs, you remember when you tremble at what's in here or something moves you, that I am merciful and compassionate. And so God is reminding us that he's merciful and compassionate. And if he is, he must want us to be that way too. He must want us to be merciful and compassionate. And you can't be merciful and compassionate and exclude people and cut them off. And we're human. We make mistakes. We make mistakes, and when we make them, we must own them. So you know what? I made a mistake. Allah, forgive me. I ask your mercy for your forgiveness, and this was not appropriate. So I change it. We change it, and that's how and little acts of kindness and compassion by ordinary people done every day help hold back the evil. The political stuff is wonderful, and those things help. But in the end, it has to be at the grassroots level. The normal person or the everyday person, how you want to say that, is the one that's the person who's in the market, who shows kindness to a stranger or to the poor, the person who maybe tutors or helps someone, or a person who does a kind act to someone that's had very little kindness shown to them. That does that makes the difference in the world. Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff. You have appreciated the communication part, and Rehan bhai especially. Uh, I would love to ask the question that you have somehow already answered. That there's a verse of Quran at your behind wall. So I want to know that
Oh yes.
uh, what is it
Yes.
symbolically for you? Like,
It's the Bismillah. It's the Bismillah, the name of God, and I
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim.
have that here because I put on my show and stuff. And I love the calligraphy. I think it's just beautiful, and I love the 99 names of God. But I love this because it reminds me when I do my shows that even though I'm a follower of Isa, but I'm submitted to God, that even though the Quran is reminding me to be merciful and compassionate, it's reminding me that I'm representing a God who is merciful and compassionate, and it's a way to also remind my friends, when they see that to be merciful and compassionate to me, to be merciful and compassionate to my Muslims, be merciful and compassionate to non-Muslims in both ways. And so yeah, it's that's why it means to me. Yeah.
Jeff, it was lovely talking to you, and it's really nice that you have spoken so beautiful words. You know that there's some sort of first hand impression or first impression. When I saw your pic, I thought that you are some sort of strict person, and
Mm,
I have to talk to you in a very disciplined manner.
I
But
see.
when I talked to you, I thought that there are some sort of souls that I have met before birth.
Oh
So
yeah.
it's like something, something like that. You are
Yeah.
quite a beautiful soul, and
Well,
it's
thank
really
you.
nice talking to you.
Well, you're
And
very
I
kind.
really appreciate your ideas and your efforts you are doing for promoting peace and especially working for
Mm,
Islam, for Islamophobia. However, no one in our country or in Muslim states is gonna appreciate you. You are doing it for your own self, and
mm,
you are doing in the community that is most resistance to you. It seems like if I'm in Pakistan and I'm here working for the Christians, and how
yes.
much resistance I have to face. It seemed like that. So I really
Yeah.
appreciate your efforts, and
Well,
I want
thank
to
you.
salute
Thank
that you
you.
are doing much, 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 much lot better things and
Yeah.
spreading the love and peace to all humanity. Thank you so
Well,
much
thank
for your
you.
time and for loving words. So
It's a
nice of you
pleasure.
talking to you.
It's a pleasure. Anytime. If you'd ever want me to come back, I'd be honored to.
Sure, I will definitely talk to you again, inshallah.
Okay. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
And
Bye bye.
bye bye. Bye bye.